Welcome to Numbers and Narratives, hosted by Ezra Kaye and Owen Terry. Sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Welcome back to Numbers and Narratives. We've got Theo Harris on the show by popular demand. How are you, Theo?
Yeah, very good. Feels like I've been here before, far more recently than I was a few weeks ago. But.
Yeah, look, I'm going to fess up. We just did like 15 minutes of the show and then realised that it wasn't recording. So
yeah, I'm really annoyed because I had a funny joke.
You had a funny joke.
No, you can't say it again,
it's
really.
not gonna
I
be-
don't think I can say it again.
It won't land quite the same.
No.
Because you guys are expecting it now.
It won't be quite the same.
But we all agree it was the world's funniest joke and the listeners all missed out.
No, the listeners really missed out there.
Yeah, not going to be able to hear it now. But anyway, just have to believe us. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the North London derby. Theo's on the show, so we're going to talk about Spurs. We're going to talk a little bit about the Champions League format. Liverpool, they played against Milan in the Champions League midweek, and they also lost to Forest on the weekend, so we'll unpack that a bit. And to wrap it up, we'll talk about the game on the weekend, the big game, Man City versus Arsenal. Sounds like I'm just saying the same
Deja
stuff.
vu.
Deja vu.
Yeah.
That's yeah. But that's goes with the territory when you don't hit the record button. All right. Let's start it off with a dumb or not, which is going to lead us into the North London
because
derby.
you guys actually forgot to answer the dumb or not last one anyway. You guys were too eager to talk about Spurs. All right, so dumb or not. Does possession really matter, or is it an overrated stat? Because essentially, Southampton are currently dead last in the league, and they are actually third for possession with 62%. Second in the league for possession with 62.1% is Manchester City, and first way ahead is Spurs with 68%. Spurs have only got 4 points from 4 games, while Man City have got 12. Southampton, as I said earlier, have got none. And to show that this isn't just something that's happening in the Premier League, in the La Liga last season, Las Palmas were second in the league for possession, but only came 16th, and based off expected goals, it should have been 19th. This year, Las Palmas are top 3 again for possession, and they're sitting 19th in the league, and based off expected goals, they should be 19th. And I think if we look at Spain at the Euros, in previous major tournaments, they'd been getting a ton of the possession, but it was about what they were doing with the possession, and the answer was they weren't doing much of the possession. Now, or this past Euros, they started to give up a bit more of the ball, but they used the ball a lot better when they had it, and that led to them being convincingly the best team in the Euros, and they ended up winning the competition. If we look at the numbers that we look for in an attacking sense or based off shooting, we don't look at shots on goal or shots on target like we used to. We've moved on from that to expected goals. We think that's a better indicator. For possession, we still just look at the raw possession stat to see who's had more possession. But studies have shown that it doesn't matter if you have more possession, as long as you're creating good chances. It doesn't matter if you create good chances with 20% possession or 80% possession, you're not more likely to win. So I think what I'm going to ask is the possession stat that we use dumb, and should we look to use stats such as field tilt, which looks more into the territory of where your possession is, instead of, teams can just pass it around the back to the goalkeeper the whole match, and they could theoretically have 100% possession, never look like scoring. Another team could only have it 10% of the time, but then they get into the opposition's box 50 times.
Yeah. I think from a statistical point of view, I totally agree with you. I'd say it is dumb that we're only looking at the pure raw possession stat as an indicator of how a game's gone. Because, like you said, there's plenty of other metrics which provide a more accurate depiction of how the ball's been used.
Yes.
But from a football sense, I wouldn't say possession's overrated. I would just say because I still, as Theo said on the last run of the show, I think there's like a correlation between having the ball and scoring and creating chances. And I think to be a top team which consistently wins titles, you need to be able to dominate games consistently. And it's incredibly hard to win titles by defending like that every game, kind of how Mourinho won titles. I just think that's really unsustainable.
It's easier to dictate the tempo of a game when you have the ball, I imagine. Obviously, teams can manipulate that, teams that are very strong on the break, things like that. But when you've got the ball, especially like teams such as Man City, they want the ball because they want control of the match. It's a form of control. So I don't know when historically that seemed to come in, because obviously in early years of football, possession, I don't think was as much of a thing, if at all, in kind of like your mid-1900s talking about. Do you know if it was like the Spanish teams, Guardiola, in like the 2000s?
I don't know when it became a big popularity thing.
Because I'm certain it wasn't always. So
no, because it's not as simple to record as shots or shots on target.
Yeah, of course, that's true.
But they do record the stat just based off passes attempted by each team. So it doesn't even matter if you make the pass or how much your team's got the ball in possession technically. It's actually just based off how many passes you've attempted.
Because I assume possession kind of evolved with that kind of tiki-taka style of play as well. So it was almost the forefront of winning matches during that period of time was tiki-taka football. It wasn't necessarily possession. But obviously, by playing tiki-taka football, the byproduct is you have more of the ball. Potentially that could be the case, but as we're looking into now, possession seems to matter less and less. You mentioned Southampton, you mentioned Tottenham. Teams are better able to control games even without the ball, it seems like. So
that's a good point.
That might be a reason for that.
I think that you are right, though, Ezra, that the more possession you have, the more consistent you're likely to be. Just because as you say, there's more things in your control. But I also like what Theo's saying, that you can control the game without the ball. Not to pump up Liverpool too much, but I think it was 19 shots to 4, and the possession was pretty much bang on even in this game, and Liverpool created far more better chances than AC Milan. And I think that there's a lot of clubs where it doesn't matter as much, because some clubs don't play their best with the ball. Some clubs actually play better without the ball. But what are the positions that those clubs are getting into with the ball? I think that's what we should be concerned with, and we're too concerned with the possession stat by itself.
Agree. Possession officially dumb.
Dumb. I agree. Well, let's move into the North London derby. Let's start off with Arsenal, and then we'll get into the Tottenham stuff. Obviously, Arteta is a possession-based coach, but he mixed it up this game. I was expecting him to press Spurs from the front. They didn't really. They sat off. They were quite happy for Spurs to have the ball, and then they were going to hit us on the counter-attack. Did that approach work pretty well for Arteta, do you think?
It worked fantastically. It worked exactly how he would have wanted the game to go. The only thing I could imagine is obviously he was probably looking for a bit more sharpness on the break, which Arsenal were quite poor at during the game. But Arteta, with Odegaard out, with Rice out, and with the new signing, Mikel Merino, not available yet, I think he always knew he was never going to control possession in that game. Tottenham had a stronger midfield. They were going to probably dominate in that area. So he knew probably best to compact the defence, sit off from Tottenham, let them have the ball, and restrict the amount of chances they're able to create. So I think it was ingenious from Arteta, really, to be able to execute that plan so well. Because as a Tottenham fan, if I could have predicted the game to go any way, I would have, word for word, given you that picture in my mind, a 1-0 away win for Arsenal with Tottenham not being able to create enough. And
yeah, it's kind of just been the same old story with Tottenham, I think, for a while. They're the worst team. They've pretty much got the worst rest defense. So just to recap on what rest defense means, when you have the ball, so when Tottenham have the ball, if they turn over the ball, then their defense is very exposed, and that's probably why Arteta was happy to not have the ball as much against Tottenham, because he knows that as you guys were saying, his midfield wasn't as strong. It would have been harder for him to control the ball. But also, not having the ball isn't as bad against Spurs because you can get them on the break. He's got a couple faster players like Martinelli. And the other thing is with Spurs, I guess I know we're supposed to start with Arsenal, but Spurs actually need this season have needed 35 entries into the penalty area to generate one expected goal.
Yeah, wow.
Which, for reference, Manchester United have only needed 16.
I think for reference, in the Coventry game last night, we had about 35 entries into the
penalty area.
I think
so. And then, you can kind of let them have the ball. But the Arteta was, I don't normally think of him as brave because he's normally very, he likes to control the game. And the last couple of games against Man City and Arsenal, they've been very cagey matches, not really willing to make many risks. But he was talking about his pragmatism during the week, how he'd changed what his side was going to do several times. And the key idea that he did was not just letting Spurs have more of the ball. He didn't get his players to double the wingers. So when the Spurs wingers receive the ball, normally two defenders go to them and you don't let the wingers have a one-on-one situation. But statistically, over the past year, Son and Brennan Johnson were both in the bottom 50% for one-on-one take-ons, successful one-on-one take-ons. So that was something that he was willing to let go of, which Arsenal are a very good defensive side. It's not something you probably predict, and it's a bit of a gamble, but that's what he did. And maybe that's something that we're going to see from Arteta a bit more in the future, more gambles. And
that's definitely not a stat Postecoglou would like. He loves his wingers taking on the defender one-on-one. And, I mean, even eye test alone, you can see that Johnson doesn't look too comfortable doing it. Son doesn't quite look as comfortable as he has in the past either. And, you're missing a big part of Postecoglou's philosophy in that.
Well, I think Spurs had 68% of possession this game again, something like that. And the dribbles attempted by both sides was 20 to 21. I can't remember which side had one more. But the point is, Arsenal had pretty much a third of the possession and they still had just as many dribbles attempted. But Spurs' dribbles were at a 35% success rate and Arsenal's were above 60% success rate.
I think in this game, possession is even more misleading because Arsenal let Spurs have the ball.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a game where both sides... Well, it wasn't like Spurs were forcing Arsenal back because they were just so dominant and we were all over them. Arsenal were quite happy for us to have the ball. And like you said, they let us have those 1v1s. And, Johnson... in particular, I thought was really disappointing.
Yeah,
he played quite well in the game prior to that when he came off the bench. But this game, his problem is, like you say, he doesn't want to take on the fullback. And I think Timber has just come back from an ACL injury. Yeah. He was on a yellow card as well. And Johnson still didn't want to take him on. Like, that was a prime example to take him on. He could get a second yellow card or he wouldn't be as tight to Johnson in the first place in fear of getting a second yellow card, and he still didn't. He didn't take him on. And Son on the other side had a bit of a go. I thought he was better than Johnson, but still, like you said, not ideal in that scenario.
With the amount of pace Johnson has, he's got to use it. He's got to be looking, especially if Spurs are going to dominate the ball. He's not going to have as many opportunities to use his pace to run in behind. He's got to use it to get to the byline and get some good crosses in. Because Spurs actually put in 31 crosses. Arsenal only put in 13. Granted, one of the one that Arsenal scored from was from a corner, but Arsenal still scored from one of their 13 crosses, and Spurs didn't score from any of 31.
I guarantee you over half of those crosses came within the last 20 to 30 minutes of the game. And
that is
all of those were pure desperation.
Yeah, and we have Solanke up front as well. We've got an aerial presence finally. Like the last few games we've been saying like Son through the middle doesn't really work. It'd be good to have Solanke back. Well, he was there and they still couldn't find him. No. Like you'd be really frustrated if you're Solanke because he had nothing but scraps to feed on. So. He had that half chance in the in the first half.
Yeah, which he probably
He should have
done
done better.
with.
It's like he just tried to take the player on instead of get the quick shot away. And
just
then,
needed one touch
and
shoot.
hit it,
Like North London derby, you can't be taking 3-4 touches in the penalty area. But obviously, that was pretty much the only thing he had in the game. So yeah, the quality of crossing was poor, and there were also unusually different crosses than Postecoglou likes as well. As we talked about, Postecoglou loves like beating the fullback, kind of that flat ball across goal into the penalty area. A lot of our crosses in that game were from slightly deeper, were very wayward a majority of the time. And I don't think Postecoglou would have been happy with that. That would never have been the game plan. So yeah, sometimes it's hard to tell, okay, are we poor because of Postecoglou's philosophy, or are we poor because we're failing to execute said philosophy?
Even the balls from the corners, the delivery from Spurs' corners were terrible. Like Saka, that one they scored from, it was a great ball. Like,
it's a brilliant ball.
Really high quality cross. And from us, like Madison and Kulusevski, never really like hitting the first man or hitting it too deep. And
well, one thing that Arsenal are quite good at is Raya's actually quite good at claiming crosses, and you've got Saliba who's pretty good at clearing crosses. Timber's another big body. Ben White's another big body. Gabriel obviously scored from a corner. He might be the best attacking threat from corners in the league.
15 goals for Arsenal now, doesn't he?
15. There you go. Yeah. I think it's between him, Van Dijk, maybe Tyrone Mings when he's fit, but he's up there. But another good aerial presence, which probably makes Spurs crosses look a bit worse. Whereas on the other hand, Spurs probably don't have as many big bodies. Mickey van der Ven's obviously very big, but I don't think he's quite as dominant as what a Gabriel is in the air, even still. And Vicario just lacks the confidence to come out and claim it like what David Raya does, which is also interesting because Spurs were linked with David Raya and Vicario. And they've obviously gone down their different paths. But yeah, I saw the same thing of the Liverpool AC Milan game where Liverpool were able to cross the ball from corners really close, from set pieces really close to the goalkeeper, and Mike Maignan for AC Milan wasn't willing to come out and get a hand on it, punch it, and Liverpool scored 2 corners that game after being second last in expected goals in the Premier League. Arsenal were pushing bodies really close to the goal line, and Vicario wasn't getting a hand on many of them, and I think that's why Arsenal's corners looked a lot better than Spurs. Is that different in... Maybe it's not just the ball from the person crossing it, but the bodies that are preventing it, making it look bad.
You should have seen some of those crosses in that game, though.
I do agree with you about Vicario. I think after the game, Gary Neville also criticised Vicario for that goal, saying he should have been more dominant and come out and claim that ball.
Because it wasn't the first time.
No,
it wasn't.
It's definitely a weakness. And he, before like corners are whipped in, he's always like running around, shouting at players, pushing players. He seems like he's a little bit like too emotional. And then he lacks concentration about what he's meant to be doing himself. Like he's interested in everyone else but himself.
It's certainly, I'm sure it's a solution. Vicario, the goalkeeping coach at Tottenham, and Postecoglou himself are looking to work on, because it was one of our biggest weaknesses last season. We've looked a bit more comfortable from corners this season. I know we do have not a dedicated set piece coach, but one of our coaches is tasked with focusing on the corners. Last season it was Jedinak, Ryan Mason. That role's been delegated now, and as we kind of saw, even that goal that Gabriel scored, you can kind of put it down to a lapse in concentration to Romero, I would say, more than kind of a structural issue that we were constantly seeing last season. So it was, a poor way to concede a goal. But I'm wondering if hopefully it looks like Vicario is spending a little bit more time focusing on that weakness of his, and Tottenham is spending a little bit more time on set pieces, that this isn't going to be the issue that it was last season, but small sample size, only time will tell, I think. Yeah,
well, last week I thought Spurs were first defensively from set pieces based on expected goals. They were actually 8th. They were second for attacking set pieces after 3 games. But it was interesting that last season Postecoglou seemed to
Brush off
any suggestion that set pieces were a problem. But after last game, it seems
like he's changed his tone a little bit. Yeah,
can't ignore it forever. I don't think.
He basically said like, there's some narrative out there that I don't care about set pieces, and
which is pretty much what he said.
It's literally exactly what he said. He's very contradictory sometimes.
He's a character.
And he was like, we focus on set pieces every week, just like every other team, and and we do care about them. But yeah, like you said, last season that certainly wasn't his tone. I agree with Theo that I don't think that goal was a structural error. It was more like Romero switching off. Also, Gabriel gave him 2 hands in the back. I know we have had a bit of a debate about this before. You don't think it's a foul? You go first.
I think it's soft. I think to a degree, it doesn't look like anyone in that Tottenham team, including Romero himself, thinks it's a foul. And I think, as much as that obviously doesn't take away the objectivity of what has occurred, I feel like it means something. The fact that no one seemed to acknowledge it means something. Because obviously if Gabriel put 2 hands in the back, shoved him to the ground, then there's a different story there. So I just think it was too soft. I think Romero was too soft.
Look, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that Romero should have to go down to earn the free kick. I think that's a silly way of refereeing.
It's even drawing attention.
It's very difficult to referee a football game, I'd say. And if there is an art to drawing a foul, I'd say. And if Romero was fully onto it and really thought it was a foul, he could have earned it, I think. But he tried to challenge, failed. Gabriel scored. That's how I see it.
If it was the goalkeeper and the goalkeeper gets pushed 2 hands in the back, I think they give the foul.
In that scenario, I don't know if there's enough in that. If Vicario had acted in the same way Romero had, I don't know if it would. It was just one of those things that visually it just doesn't come across.
It doesn't look like a foul. Look, I admit when they first scored, I didn't even notice it. It wasn't until the replay that I noticed it.
It took me a few watches to actually find where it was. Yeah.
And then, they were talking about it in commentary, saying it could potentially go to VAR. Don't know whether it did or not. I definitely don't think it's a clear and obvious mistake. So from that stance, I guess go with the referee's decision.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But I do think that Gabriel's made an impact on Romero there. If he doesn't push him, Romero is going to be a lot tighter to him. He probably gets up and it stops him. At least he might still win the header, but it might not go straight into the back of the net. It might have put him off a little bit. And yeah, again, if that happens in the middle of the park and some midfielders given pushed over, I think it's given as a foul. I don't know. It's a contentious one.
It is. Yeah, I don't think there's one definite either way.
But yeah, let's talk about Ange's post-game comments. He had a bit of a feisty interview with a Sky Sports journalist.
It's common for him, really.
Quite common for him. It was kind of a poor handling of the question, I thought. She kept kind of interrupting him with a follow-on question without letting him answer the question. So he got angry by that and kind of snapped back and said, no, I always win trophies in my second season, which he has done. But I don't...
He doubled down on that today, didn't he? He's saying, I only stated facts, I do always win the second season.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Is that a smart move for a club which hasn't won trophies in so long?
I think that's Ange to a T. I think whether he's at Tottenham or whether he's at Celtic or wherever he is, that's the kind of mentality he has. And at the end of the day, that's why we signed him. That's why he's in charge. That's the mentality that Daniel Levy wanted to bring to the club. So yeah, I think... Do I think it's a smart move? I think we'll see if we win something at the end of the season, then it might tell us a bit more. But the reality is he has. That is the truth. And it's not only winning something, obviously. He's won the league in his second season, I think, at every club he's been at. But thankfully, he didn't mention that. But hopefully, yeah. I don't think it's a bad move, per se. I don't think it brings any benefits, but I think it's an unavoidable part of Postecoglou.
I don't think it influences his position with Daniel Levy or the ownership, but it's not like they're going to hold him to that. Now
No.
he said that, but it's more like the pressure from the media. Like that stuff is going to go viral. If Spurs don't win a trophy, you know, it's just going to come back up, and that would be a running joke.
But
again.
how would you guys feel as Spurs fans? Let's say Ange Postecoglou does pretty well in the league, and doesn't. He has a pretty good season, but doesn't win a trophy. Do you guys really care after he said those comments? Or
No,
does
I don't care.
doesn't bother
I
me.
know it's more about like the perception.
Public,
Yeah,
perspective.
I think that there probably will be a bit from the outside, but I don't think if from Andrew's perspective, if it doesn't affect the board, if it doesn't affect the players negatively or the fans, then he's just going to say what he wants.
If anything, I think it could be positive for the players. If Ange has that belief in, I believe Ange has that belief in his players that he's got now more than he did, say, at the beginning of last season. Now he's got a few more faces that are familiar to his system. What was I going to say? Owen.
Spurs beat Coventry. Spurs beat Coventry last night. I didn't watch the game because I already don't have bean sports, but Theo's found his masterful way of watching the game. And what did you make of it? From what I hear, they were pretty disappointing once again.
More of the same issues.
It was awful. It was the same issues magnified 100 times, I think. Ange made 7 changes for that game, which is, I think he made 8 changes for that game. I think he made 7 last season in the Fulham game when we got knocked out in the 4th round of the Cup. And it looked like a disjointed performance. We dominated possession, but didn't have a single shot in the first half, which against Coventry, though they did well in the FA Cup last season, is really poor. Pretty much the whole team lacked any kind of creativity. And it is worrying to a degree, I think, because it's those teams that sit back and are able to hold their shape defensively that we seem to have no idea what to do about. It's what Arsenal did. It's what Coventry did as well. And we need to find a solution for playing against those kinds of teams.
Well, I couldn't find the expected goals because it was only a League Cup game, but I did notice that Coventry had more shots. That's not something I'd normally care about. But Spurs are... their shots are the lowest quality in the Premier League right now, except for Ipswich Town. And Ipswich Town have come up against Liverpool and Man City in their first 4 games. And we don't expect much from Ipswich Town anyway. And then the other way, if we look at from a defensive sense, the shots that they're conceding, they're the highest quality. And nearly 88% of the shots Spurs concede are inside the box. All of them against Arsenal. All the shots conceded against Arsenal were inside the box as well.
Yeah, those stats don't bode too well.
No, they don't.
I don't know if it's been as bad as it looks. Points wise, 4 points from 4 games. That's not good. It's not a good start. They've squeezed through a League Cup game.
But it's the same issues. Is that not concerning?
No, 100%. But I'm still kind of hopeful that it's going to click going forwards. Like when we've got the ball anyway, our build-up play's been quite decent. Our playing out from the back's been quite decent. It's just that final third where we've really fell short. But I'm kind of hopeful that it's going to click at some point.
I hope so, because we came up against teams the first half of last season that were sitting back a lot more. Probably not quite in the same way that's tailored specifically to Postecoglou's style, but we managed to break apart teams that were sitting back. Even Everton this season, obviously, we pulled apart 4-0. But these games have seriously lacked a kind of cutting edge, some movement, some energy that you just can't tell why it's not here now when it was this time last season even. And I think it's something Postecoglou does need to solve quickly because the blueprint's out there now for how to play against Tottenham. And if we keep producing performances like we do against Arsenal and like we do against Coventry, like we do against Newcastle, the same thing is going to keep happening.
Last thing I want to talk about Spurs is Brennan Johnson. He's obviously Postecoglou's man, brought in for big money. He's played a lot of games out on that right wing, and he's really failed to take players on. He is a player who's got heaps of pace, but he doesn't really know how to create space by himself. He can run into space when there's space to run into, and he's quite good in that sense. But when teams sit back, like you're saying, he really struggles to create any space. Is it getting to a point where we need to look at a different option there on the right wing? Obviously, Kulusevski's been playing in midfield and playing quite well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think Odebear was that player, but obviously, or not necessarily obviously for anyone who's watching the show, the podcast, but he pulled up hamstring injury during the Coventry game in the first 15 minutes and looks like it's not going to be a great one. So Johnson might have a longer run in the team than his natural replacement, who is now out injured, would have come in. But yeah, you mentioned, I don't know if it was this version of the podcast or the one.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think it was the one 40 minutes ago.
Yeah, but he looks a lot more confident coming off the bench. In the Newcastle game, he looked better when he came off the bench. So I don't know, maybe it's a confidence issue. Maybe it's a fatigue issue. I can't imagine it be a fatigue issue this early in the season, but it's clear that he's probably not fit to be starting games at this stage. But what solutions do we have? I'm not sure it's Werner. I'm not sure it's Kulusevski back on the wing. So the best one that comes to my mind is hopefully build up his confidence a bit more. He scored against Coventry, scored the winner, which will do him a world of good, hopefully. And hopefully we can see him produce a few more good performances.
All right, let's move on to the Champions League. Liverpool were in action against AC Milan, but before we touch on that game, I want to get your general thoughts on this new Champions League format. You're not a fan, Owen?
So I'm not a big fan. Do you want me to quickly run through the major changes?
Yes.
Okay, so essentially it used to be 32 teams. Now it's expanded to 36 teams. It used to be 8 groups of 4 teams, and each team in the group of 4 would play each other twice. Now what's happening is you play 8 different teams, and instead of it just being between a little mini table between your group, where you just got to finish in the top 2 in your group to make it to the round of 16. Now it's a table from 1 to 36. If you finish in the top 8, you go through to the round of 16. If you finish 9th to 24th, then you make it to the playoff to make it to the round of 16. So essentially it's meant that there's you're playing at least 2 more games, potentially 4 more games, which a lot of the players aren't happy about. They've been speaking about potentially going on strike about how many games they're going to have to play. And I guess the other major change is now there's no teams that go down into the Europa League. But for me, the reason why I don't like it is it makes it a lot less likely that the smaller teams can progress. And also, I don't think there was a need for the more games. It's not something I'm a big fan of. Oh, and on top of that, now instead of your seeding being based off your previous season's performance, it's based off your past 5 seasons or something like that. So even though Bayer Leverkusen won the Bundesliga last season, they were not put in the first seed. Leipzig and Bayern Munich, who came 2nd and 4th, I think, in the Bundesliga, were put in the first seed while Bayer Leverkusen were in the 2nd seed, which I also do not like.
That is bizarre.
It makes it a lot harder for the smaller clubs. If it's your first time in the Champions League, you're not going to be in the top seed.
What do you think there?
More games is an issue for players, and it's something that keeps coming up. There is, I don't know if the strike's being talked about primarily by Man City players for whatever reason. I believe Rodri came out. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, talking about players might strike on the additional game time, which with the amount of injuries players are picking up at the moment, the little time they get off, I think the Champions League format having more games is never going to be a positive solution for players. In terms of the format itself, it's exciting to see clubs play 8 different teams instead of three teams twice, I think. But it does just squeeze out some of the randomness, some of the beauty of the UCL that, like, you get these fun teams making it through these four team leagues, mini leagues, I guess. And I think the jury's still out for me personally. And the main issue for sure is the additional games for players.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. Like you said, the jury's still out. We'll have to wait and see if it is just going to be the normal prestigious clubs who are going to get through, or are we going to see some smaller teams progress? Only time will tell with that. But it certainly seems like it's more likely for the big teams to go through. Let's talk about Liverpool then. They played against Forest on the weekend, AC Milan in midweek. Which one do you want to start with?
Let's just talk about Forest. The Milan game's not that interesting. Liverpool are just too good. It's more fun talking about Liverpool losing, I think. I've got more bones to pick and more stats already to go, this is why I didn't go this way. Ugh.
So they lost 1-0, goal by Hudson-Odoi.
Brilliant goal as well.
Yeah. How did the game pan out in your view?
Well, for me, it was very similar to the first half of the Ipswich Town game. And I say that because in that game, the main issue was Liverpool lost too many duels. And Liverpool don't have a natural defensive midfielder. We have Ryan Gravenberch, who he's arguably been our best player so far this season. He played very well against AC Milan as well. It's not just him. But Nottingham Forest looked to play a lot of long balls, and Liverpool were very good in the air for that stage. Van Dijk and Konate are actually top two for aerial duel success rate. I think third was Mark Cucurella, which is a bit random.
That's random.
But so Liverpool actually won 62% of the aerial duels. But it was the second ball, and Van Dijk spoke about this after the game, the second balls that Liverpool weren't winning. And Liverpool only won 36% of the ground balls, which goes to show, like, once they've headed the ball down and it's the second 50-50 who's going to win the ball, more often than not, it was Nottingham Forest. And to further that, the notion about how they were losing balls and it was a bit concerning, Liverpool were fouled 6 times, Nottingham Forest were fouled 15 times. So they were giving up fouls. And again, much like the Ipswich game, I don't think it was because of... I don't think they were tactical fouls. I think that they were just losing 50-50s and coming out worse, giving away yellow cards. And Slot also spoke about we struggled to play against a deep block, and most of the other teams we played against were willing to press. So a few concerns there.
Yeah, similar concern for Spurs playing against a team which likes to sit back.
Yeah. So it would be an interesting watch. But can I also say some more love for Nottingham Forest? They're my new second team. I love Nottingham Forest this season.
Brighton replaced?
I don't know if I ever had Brighton as a second team. Brentford. No? I used to like Brentford because they played Moneyball quite well. Nottingham Forest went through the Chelsea model of buy as many players as you can and then weed out the ones you don't like. And it's kind of worked out well because they, as I said last week, that they've kind of focused on the set pieces. They've been concerned about it. They brought in Milenkovic. They also brought in a 6'5" goalkeeper who they're not playing, but they brought him in because he was supposed to help with the aerial stuff. They've been doing really well with set pieces. Milenkovic was first in headed clearances in Serie A last year, and his partner's Murillo really nice. And Milenkovic is also first for expected goals from attacking corners. So that's quite exciting for them. They're also, the shots that they're conceding is only 52% of them are in the box, which is very different from Tottenham's 88%. So they're doing really well in a defensive sense, and I just wish the Spurs had a really good coach like Nuno.
It's one to watch for sure.
Anything to say about the Champions League game against Milan? Like you said, they're just too good?
The one area of concern was that Mike Magnon played a long ball and it went to Chimikas, who had to compete with someone in the air, and he lost out, and that led to Pulisic's goal. So a lot of the other teams like Arsenal and Man City are playing with quite tall left-backs and right-backs, where Liverpool are not. Robertson and Trent they're not tiny. They're reasonable size, but they're not like centre backs that have moved to left back or right back like with those other clubs. So I wonder if that's something that's going to be looked at a bit more. And the other thing was that Cody Gakpo played really well from left wing.
Scored a brilliant goal.
Scored a brilliant goal. Yeah, so before the podcast, Theo's trying to tell me that Cody Gakpo scored a goal in this game.
Which I did not watch.
Which he did not watch. And Ezra backed him, even though I was the only one who watched the game. And, yeah.
So that was the original Dom or Not in the version where I did not hit the record button.
That was one of the really funny jokes. There was obviously plenty others that were the funniest of all time that we missed out on.
Yeah, all right. Do we want to talk about the Man City Arsenal game on the weekend then?
Just before we wrap up, another interesting thing I note about Slot is he played the same starting 11 before the international break and afterwards.
Yes.
I think 10 of the
Glad you
11
mentioned
players
that.
played international football as well.
That sounds right.
Klopp traditionally, after international breaks, would make between 2 and 3 changes to the starting 11 before compared to after. Do you think that made a difference in energy levels?
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I really like that you mentioned that. Arne Slot said that it didn't. He was adamant about that. He said the problems we had were not rotational problems. Were not because we didn't rotate the team enough. They were still fighting to the end. So do I think it was an energy issue? No, I don't think that it was necessarily an energy issue. But there was a lot of sloppy, misplaced passes. Liverpool played, I think, 55 long balls and 12 of them went out straight out. Oh, so we conceded 12 goal. We gave away 12 goal kicks, which doesn't seem like a big issue, but a lot of time can be absorbed from goal kicks. I think sometimes I've noticed it take over a minute for the goalkeeper to take the ball. And for reference, in the Spurs-Arsenal game, there wasn't 12 goal kicks between both teams. And I think that was a tactical issue that Slot wouldn't have liked. So if he had players... If he'd used more players that had been like Joe Gomez, that had been with him the whole time through the international break, maybe even you could look at a Kazea, who's even though he's a new signing, he had those couple weeks with Schlott, and they could have been preparing for Nottingham Forest, and then there perhaps wouldn't have been those sloppy passes. That's something that I think could have helped, but hindsight's great.
He'll learn plenty, I'm sure.
Yeah. He wasn't one to rotate much between games at Feyenoord, but in game, he likes to substitute a lot. I think in 5 matches, Trent Alexander-Arnold has been subbed out 4 of the 5. And that was the one game where we were chasing a game. He didn't get subbed out. He got moved to midfield. So still changes happening plenty, which Klopp didn't do as much.
Yeah. Let's move on to Man City and Arsenal then. I suppose, do Arsenal now have like a blueprint of exactly how to go to the Etihad and play?
I don't. To a degree, yes. I don't think Arsenal can afford to be that weak on the counter-attack like they were against us. I think they need to be a lot sharper. They have Declan Rice back in midfield, which will be huge in that game. I believe Odegaard's still going to be out, which will be a big miss.
Saka, do we know?
I think Saka should be good to go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's also very big.
Yeah.
Especially against City's centre-backs, who are quite slow.
Yeah.
Someone who could dribble. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
Of course,
you.
no, that's right. I took my time. I think Arsenal can't do exactly what they did against Tottenham in that game. I think they will concede a majority of possession in the same way, but I think they need to be a bit more clever going forward if they're gonna get something out of the game. Don't think they can quite rely on corners potentially. In saying that, they are good at them.
They haven't started off this season too good in an attacking sense from corners. Their expected goals were very low. I think they're 4th last actually to start the season, which isn't a great start.
It's typical that they saved them for Spurs.
Yeah.
Well, there might be something in that it's for Spurs. For some reason, it happens for Spurs. But it will be interesting to see if there's any set piece goals for Arsenal because the Man City. The Arsenal set-piece coach used to be at Man City, but Pep Guardiola didn't give him enough time to work on set-pieces, so he moved to Arsenal. So it's just another one of those City people that have moved over to Arsenal, like the other half of the team, yeah.
How do you expect the game to play out on? Pretty similar to the last time Arsenal went went up there and got the draw.
Super boring.
Yeah.
I think it would be really boring because they played chess in their heads all day long with this game, thinking about what the other one's going to do, and they end up just both playing it safe. And and I think De Bruyne is likely to be out, so there's a bit less excitement there. I think Man City are actually a little bit worse this season. I don't think that might be a little bit unpopular because they have got 4 wins from 4 and haven't had a couple of their best players come back. But Brentford were dominant for the first 30 minutes against them, and I think there's a few chinks that can be exposed by Arsenal if they can get the ball to Saka and Martinelli taking plays one-on-one. Martinelli actually had 6 one-on-one take-ons completed, I think, or 6 dribbles completed against Spurs, which is the most this season. So that's where I think Arsenal can get at City, but it's still Manchester City, and they've got Haaland who scored 9 goals.
Yeah.
Arsenal, I think, scored 6. Maybe it was. The point is, Haaland's got more goals than Arsenal Football Club, who we expect to be Man City's biggest contender.
And you still don't have Haaland in your fantasy team, do you?
Yeah, well, it's hard to get 15 mil when you don't start, but I'm stuck with Bruno. So,
does the game? How important is the game for the title race? I don't know. Last time they played, Gary Neville was like, Arsenal have to win this game to win the league, and they ended up getting a draw. And not winning the league. But it's still early days in the season. It doesn't really matter.
Very early.
Yeah.
I do think Arsenal need to make sure the gap doesn't widen too much. I think had they not gotten a result against Tottenham, this would be slightly more important. But really, they're 2 points behind at the moment. You don't want to...
It's a 6-pointer, though.
It is a 6-pointer, yeah. You don't want to fall too far behind City, but 5 games into the season, it's not life or death just yet.
It's not life or death, but it's a big game. I think, according to Opta, Man City have been given an 87% chance of winning, Arsenal 10%, Liverpool 2%, and then it's like Chelsea and Newcastle combined for 0.2% chance of winning. So I think if Arsenal can get a win, that would be very big in going a long way and helping them have a chance of winning the league, because Man City don't drop many games.
No.
This is one of the 2 times they're in control of making sure they drop points, that they can drop points. So yeah, it's not like it's game over, because as Theo said, like it's the 5th game week.
Yeah.
But also it's 6 points against a team it's a 6-point game against a team that doesn't normally drop points. So.
And particularly when the title's being decided by 1 or 2 points at the end of the day, when it's not one you want to look back on and with regret and think like we could have done something better.
Well, Liverpool were 1 game away from being 100-point invincible champions, and it was only a millimetre or 2 away from the ball going over the line, but it was a John Stones clearance, which meant Liverpool didn't get the league. They had 1 loss and got 97 points.
I wonder how many times Owen's going to bring that up in this
still
podcast.
A bit bitter.
I'm still pretty bitter.
I love how he explains it all. We haven't heard it before.
I'm
never going to let it go.
I live through it. Okay. Hey, just be glad I got over the Steven Gerrard slip. I mean, how many times have you lost a bloody Premier League title in the last day?
Yeah.
I've seen it 3 times. Like
the greatest pain I've ever experienced is Leicester year, and that wasn't even that. That wasn't even all that.
Yeah, Leicester only got 81. I've seen 97, Theo.
Yeah.
Surely Sissoko handball has to be the most painful Champions League final.
Most painful moment. I know this is completely off
You
topic.
bring this up all the time.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of pain
There's a
involved
lot
in
of
Tottenham.
All right. This week, the legal battle between Man City and the Premier League started about their 115 charges. I just want to talk about some hypotheticals, have a bit of fun with it. Let's say Man City are found guilty. What do we think is let's say they're found guilty of everything, 115 charges. What's an appropriate punishment?
They have to change sports. They're not allowed to play football anymore.
This is such a difficult question. And obviously, as someone who has... And we've not seen something like this before as well. So there's not actually a set blueprint on what will happen if they get charged with 50 charges, 10, or all 115. But you could imagine it'd be something along the lines of relegation or a heavy points deduction. In which case, again, depending on the charges they're found guilty of, you're probably likely just going to see them go down for one season and come back up. But I think the likelihood they are charged is probably quite low, to be honest.
Do you think... I think there's been talk of like a points deduction over multiple seasons rather than all in just the one season. Is that more fair, do you think?
Does that mean they drop down? Does that mean they drop down like to League One, League Two? Are we talking like a 20-point deduction across multiple seasons?
I think it would be 20-point deduction over multiple seasons. Or if it was that bad, and they were charged guilty, I don't think it would be like 50 points for 3 seasons.
Keeping them in at that point.
Okay, and if they are relegated, what does that mean for Pep? Do you, I know his contract's running down anyway.
If they stay up, he might not be here next season. Yeah. So I cannot imagine he'd stay if they were relegated in no perceivable universe. And whether that be... Do you know if there's a date in place for when an outcome's going to be...
I don't think there is. I think they're expecting one by the end of the season. So
okay.
No time soon.
It would be really funny if they got relegated and then they failed the profit sustainability rules again because they lost all the revenue from Champions League and Premier League. Yeah. And so then they just got in another
points deduction.
But that's actually that's the punishment that I want. Like forever, infinite points deductions.
I believe, as you said, I believe that the ruling is
recurring.
Looking to be done by the end of this season, but then I believe City have an opportunity to
appeal it.
So it's going to be a lengthy, it's going to be a lengthy process. In which case, honestly, there's a chance Pep isn't in charge if they get charged anyway. So, if they go down, no, I don't think it'd stay. Is that even a possible scenario? Yeah,
probably not.
What about stripping titles? You're a Liverpool fan, Owen. Would you like to see you handed the Premier League?
Yes.
But is that?
It's not fulfilling though, is it?
Yeah.
It's anticlimactic.
Wouldn't it? Yeah, exactly.
It's not the same, but it's better than not having a Premier League title, isn't it? It's like if I said to you, would you rather have a Premier League title or not? But you don't get... I'll take it.
Look, I'll take anything I can get my hands on.
Lifting the trophy and things like that. That's
Would
awful.
they whip it out and do like a trophy run down the street in the bus? Just
Liverpool had to.
Elated celebration.
Liverpool didn't get a trophy parade for their actual title win anyway.
Is that during
that's true.
COVID?
During COVID, they didn't get to do it. So
they could have two.
We'll have two. I mean,
over consecutive days.
Yeah.
we had like 100. We had billion people rock up for our League Cup and FA Cup trophy parade.
A billion? That's a lot. 2 billion.
3.
I can't remember exactly the specifics of these charges, but I think it might date back to like the 2014 13-14 season.
I hope so.
So
Steven Gerrard.
Steven Gerrard gets his Premier League. You get 3 trophies on the bus for the parade.
3 titles because we'll take them all.
Take them all. Bring them all back. All right.
I actually think Arsenal should get a points deduction last season as well.
Yeah.
4 titles.
Oh yes. Yeah. Yep.
Match the number of billions that are at the parade.
No, that would get double that. Everyone celebrates.
Should we wrap up with our quickfire questions?
Yep, sounds good to me.
One answer, right? One answer.
One word answer. Yeah, that's the one. And for the first time in a while, I've actually written some down.
Well done.
Let's start with you though.
All right. Should the English League Cup and Scottish League Cup be combined?
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
That sounds great. Yeah.
One word, boys.
Sorry.
How many entire football clubs do you think Haaland will outscore in the Premier League this season?
12.
12?
No.
Maybe. I don't know. He said 12.
Yeah, I said 12.
I'd say 5. Yeah.
Do you know what it was last season?
Nah, no clue. It's a good question though, isn't it?
Close to 12, right? Billion?
12 billion, yeah. Would you rather win the Premier League or Champions League?
Premier League.
Premier League.
Is the Champions League becoming a Super League?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should players go on strike over the fixture congestion?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, that's me done.
One of my questions is a bit disappointing because we already spoke about it earlier. But anyway, let's start
alright.
with the first one. Are Arsenal better than they were last season?
No.
No.
Such a good. Anyway.
It's hard to answer.
This is the question, which is kind of we've already spoke about. Is possession-based football becoming less important?
Yeah.
Yes. Nice.
Will Solanke score 15 plus goals in the Premier League?
No.
Yes.
Will Villa make it through to the knockout stages of the Champions League?
Ooh.
Round of 16 or knockouts?
Round of 16. Is that not the same thing?
9th to 24th playoff for the round of 16.
All right. No, it's just round of 16. Yep.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if it was the 9th to 24th.
Last one. Is 5th place an acceptable season for Spurs?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Let's leave it there. Pleasure having you on as always.
Thank you very much for having me back.
You've basically done 2 podcasts today because we did the first one without hitting the record button.
1.3 recurring, maybe.
So yeah, I
5
enjoyed
billion.
it. Thanks for coming on, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you guys next week.